Today, I want to talk about analog versus digital guitar tones, tube amps versus amp sims, real mic'd speakers versus IRs. And I might have a rather unpopular opinion here, but I believe that more analog gear will make metal sound better again. Today, I want to talk about why I still record guitars the old school way whenever I do a proper production, and maybe this can be inspiring for some of you guys. I got my flame suit on, let's get started. First of all, this is not going to be a video where I compare an analog rig to a digital rig and show you how this sounds 3% better than the other one. I could do that, but that's not my point. We are beyond that. These days, digital sounds great. I mean, you have those moments. We just had that today. We spent like 3 hours trying to capture an analog rig with our Kemper, and it just didn't sound the same. We were reamping the upcoming Kanonenfieber record with a Fryette amp and the Carnivore speaker, and it just didn't sound the same. So yes, you have those moments where analog just sounds a little bit better, but again, that's not the point. You can make a world-class sounding record. You can get world-class sounding guitar tones entirely in the box using digital gear, using plugins. So technically, we're not limited by digital anymore. Right? And the proof is there are enough great sounding, amazing sounding records out there that have been produced entirely in the box. So I have no problem with that. This is maybe where this video could end, but I'm just getting started because there is a big problem that digital introduces. And the problem is that digital gear, or let's say the way how you guys use digital gear, make you fat and lazy and make your production sound boring. So fucking boring. And that is something that annoys me. For example, if I listen to any of the big metal playlists on Spotify, just listen to the kick-ass metal playlist there. You know, I fall asleep after 5 songs because everything sounds the same. And that is because everybody's using the same gear in the same way. And that is the real problem. So I can hear the same amp sims, I can hear the same drum samples. It's not only about guitar tones, it's the whole production. I don't get inspired by listening to that. Don't get me wrong, it sounds great. It sounds fantastic. Technically, it sounds much better than anything 10 or 20 years ago. That's not my problem. The problem is everything sounds the fucking same. So before we analyze how people used to create guitar tones and how they do it today, let me just say that these days I believe it's not so much about sounding good anymore, it's about sounding unique, about being creative. Because good guitar tones have been democratized. You know, you can simply get a plugin for $50 and open up a preset these days, and you will probably sound better than most of the productions from 20, 30 years ago. You know, and that is an achievement, and that is fantastic, especially if you just want to play guitar at home. Now everybody can have a decent or even a great guitar tone. That is something I really love. But the problem is that most people stop here. They don't go beyond that. There is no creativity. So let's have a look at guitar tones used to be created and how people create them today. So I might sound very old now, which I am, by the way, but back in the days, you were forced to create a guitar tone from scratch, from the ground up. Pedal, amp, cabinet, speaker choices, microphone choices, and you just started from zero, from scratch, and came up with a guitar tone depending on the gear that was available to you. And I believe that a lot of the iconic guitar tones that we've heard over the decades were just experiments, were accidents, were like based on what was available at that time. The maybe most famous example might be the Entombed classic Swedish chainsaw guitar tone, which is just based on the limitation of them just having this shitty HM2 pedal and a PV Bandit amp. If they had access to Neural DSP plugins, I'm pretty sure we wouldn't have that tone today. And the same is true for a lot of other iconic tones. That means if you are forced to come up with your own sound and do that from scratch, the chances are high that you're not going to sound generic, that you're not going to sound like everybody else. And this is something that still inspires me. That's the reason for me to use analog gear, because I know that each time something's going to happen, something's going to change. Even if I try to recreate a certain tone from last year or last week, whatever, I'm mostly not able to do that. And then always something happens. I might try a new miking technique. I might try a new pedal. I might try setting up the amp differently. There are just things happening if you use analog gear. And that is what inspires me to come up with something new. And the opposite of that is how people create guitar tones today. And that is very preset based. And again, the problem is not the digital tools. The problem is how people use them. And like I just said, presets are a curse. I would say presets are a curse, because let's have a look at how people dial in guitar tones today. So for example, I'm talking to you now. For example, if you are a Gojira fan, probably what you're going to do, and I can understand that, is get the Neural DSP Gojira plugin, and then you try the presets and you end up with a preset that is called Gojira Fat Rhythm Guitar 2 or something, and you're going to use that. And the problem is, it's probably going to sound great. And again, it's going to sound much better than what people achieved 20 years ago when they came up with a guitar tone from scratch. It sounds a lot better. And the problem is that you're going to stop here. This should be the starting point for a tone hunting journey. But the problem is that most people stop here because it sounds great. I'm not forced, to move on from here. And now, how are you going to sound? First of all, you're probably going to sound like a lot of other people because they're also going to use that preset. That's one thing. And the other thing is, probably you are making some kind of Gojira-esque music, aren't you? That means you're going to end up sounding like a cheap Gojira clone because you're even trying to emulate that tone. And I'm pretty sure when Gojira make a new record, they're not using their plugin. They're using something else. They go one step further. You know what I mean? That is the difference. The problem with the plugins is that they make it so easy to sound good that people don't move on from here. Okay. And that is my problem as well. So I have caught myself just, especially using my Kemper amp, where I have a lot of the tones, the profiles that I captured. And then I just use whatever, Kohle Diesel number 3, and I know it sounds great, and I know it's going to work. And it's just going to take me 1 minute or two, just one click. And then I can move on from here, which just makes my life a lot easier. But I know that it's not going to be as special, this production, compared to me just thinking about what could I use to make this production, to make this band sound the way they should. You know what I mean? And that, for me personally, involves starting from scratch again. That doesn't mean that I always do something crazy, but it means that I really like pull out all the cables, think about which amps I want to use, pull them out, bring them into the room, mic up some speakers, maybe try a few things that I haven't tried before, and just wing it from there, And sometimes you end up using this exactly the same stuff you used last week, and sometimes you just find something new and something exciting. But even if you use the same stuff like last week, very often it just goes into a different direction, and this will make you sound different. And that is the key to interesting sounding productions and guitar tones these days. I know that I will sound like a snob to a lot of you guys, because I know not everybody can afford a lot of fancy tube amps and a lot of cabs and speakers, and not everybody has a big live room where you can make noise 24/7. I know that. I'm privileged. That is luxury. But you know what? You don't need that at all. You don't need that at all, because the irony, and I still don't get that, the whole irony these days is that it is so much easier and so much faster to use and abuse digital gear in a creative way. There is no reason why you should stop at that fucking Gojira Fat Guitars preset. That, by the way, doesn't exist. And by the way, nothing against Gojira or Neural DSP. But there's no reason to stop there. It's actually much easier to combine all sorts of weird plugins and gear, stuff that is not even intended for guitars, things that you can't even do in the analog world. So finding your own tone, going crazy, going creative is so much easier. Right? So my way of doing this the analog way maybe comes from me doing this for decades, maybe comes from me being old. But you guys, with 5 clicks, you can do something that nobody has ever done before. You just need some inspiration, okay? So I don't know, you can create rooms that don't exist. You can combine IRs of 15 different cabs, something that you can't do in the real world. You can plug in your guitar into a virtual Fairchild compressor and use that as a boost pedal for an amp that you typically don't use for metal. You can just do crazy shit. Why don't you do it? Why do you go for that fucking preset again? I don't get it. And especially if you are younger than the old fart sitting here talking to you, you should try to change something and go somewhere else. Because once again, these days, it's not about sounding good. We're beyond that. It's not about digital versus analog. It is whatever inspires you to sound unique and not to sound boring. Okay, now I got a little excited, right? So you can tell this is something that is important to me, and I would just like to see people using and abusing digital gear differently and not trying to copy what everybody else is doing. There are some guys out there who work digitally and get like unique and creative tones, but a lot of the stuff is just, I fall asleep after 5 songs. Okay, thanks for listening to me. I'm sure you want to make a comment down there and let me know your opinion. Let me know what inspires you. I want to hear your opinion and maybe some crazy suggestions. I recently found out that playing an HM2 pedal, the Grindstein pedal actually, into a really cranked high watt amp sounds amazing. And that's something that I just found out by accident, I think, in a plugin in Softube's amp room. And that is something that I actually have recreated in the real world now. And I love those moments when you just find something new. Okay, so let me know what you have found. So that was a little rant from my side. I hope it made sense. And again, I'm not trying to criticize anybody. I'm just trying to make this word sonically a little more diverse. Okay, thanks for watching. I see you in hell, motherfuckers. Bye-bye.